Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. You're listening to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. More women than ever are faced with challenging decisions on a regular basis. I am so privileged to sit down with them to discuss exactly what they've gone through and how they've come out the other side, realizing their wildest dreams. I'm sure you'll be able to relate. And don't forget to stay to the end to take advantage of my latest free gift. Let's get started. Hello, you wildly courageous women, you. Welcome to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, and as always, we're here talking about decisions that have been made in our lives that were courageous or impactful or changed the course of our life, or even one that we wish we could go back on. Each week, I join you twice, once with a guest and once solo. Today, I'll be sharing an impactful decision that I've made in my life. Since I've been studying the science of decision making for over 30 years, the majority of my life's decisions have been made very intentionally using my 5-step Decision Smith system and app. I'll walk you through all of my thoughts behind the scenes. But before we get started, I want to remind you to stay to the end to get access to my latest freebie. All right, we're going to take this step by step. I want to set the stage for you as it relates to the decision I can't wait to share with you today. I'm going to talk to you about the background, the circumstances, what my mindset was, who I talked to, if I had a plan, how I made the decisions that I made. So today we're going to talk about the decision I made to move. And there's a lot of background and a lot of history leading up to that. So let me take you back. So shortly after we got married, I'm trying to think of the year. Actually, it was that fall. So we got married in the spring. And that fall, we found our dream home. We had rented for a year and then purchased a home even before we were engaged or married to get into the real estate world. I hated paying rent every month, and I wanted to, start investing at least in our own real estate. So we found a place that was an interim home for us. We knew it wasn't going to be our forever home, and we bought it. And we had made the decision to live there up until at least the kids started school. And at that point, again, we weren't engaged, we weren't married, certainly didn't have kids. But our thought process was we would live in that home and then move to wherever our forever home would be by the time the kids started school. So they would start at a school that they would ultimately continue through and not have to move once they were in school. So fast forward, bought that original house, got engaged, got married. And then that fall, we had been looking for quite some time at different locations to live. We did a lot of research in terms of towns that we could live in, living in the suburbs of a big city. We had a lot of choices in terms of what town we could live in. All depending on how far we'd be willing to commute to our jobs. So we spent weekends traversing the countryside. And I think we got to a point where we realized that to be able to have the house that we really, really wanted, we would probably have to build that house. And so we started visiting new builds and model homes and, researching all the different areas and builders that were available to us. And I remember one trip where we visited a community that we thought might be the right community for us. And we went through a model home, and I remember stepping across the threshold and looking back to my husband behind me and seeing the look on his face just stepping across the threshold. And we both kind of looked at each other, and like we both felt the energy of that home and knew that that would probably be it. We just loved how we felt walking in the front door. We loved every inch of that model home. It was just, it catered to everything that we were looking for. Um, and it was pretty exciting because we'd been through a lot of homes at that point in time and seen a lot of different builders and been to a lot of different towns. So we considered this home, but it turns out we were a little bit late to the party because all of that model, all of the ones that they were building in the subdivision that they had available were already sold. So there weren't any available. They still had a few lots though that they hadn't determined which model they would put on that lot. So we kind of put it out of our minds because we knew that that was a great choice for us in terms of the house. But if there wasn't one available to us, we couldn't manufacture one. So we kept looking. And then one day, the real estate agent that we'd been working with through the builder called us and said, "Hey, we've decided to put the model that you were looking at onto this particular lot." And it was the lot that we loved because it was a pie-shaped lot. And the reason there had been question about whether or not that model would be put there was because of the size of the house we actually were looking at. It needed to be made narrower and longer because it was too wide for the lot because of the pie, in terms of it being too close to the building next door, the home next door. There has to be a certain amount of space between homes, so they would have to rejig the footprint of the model that we were looking at to make it fit, but they called to tell us that they could do that. So when they explained what that would look like, that sounded okay. But then he said to me, "But they made 2 more changes to the house, so I need to share with you what those were." And I said, "Well, I love the house the way it is, so if there's changes, I don't know if I want it." But what he said was, "Well, first of all, I know you guys had been looking at elevation A, which didn't have a covered porch at the front. Elevation B did, but elevation A, just in terms of internally, worked better for us in terms of the bedroom layout." He said, "But the way that we've had to build this, we are keeping inside elevation A, but we're adding front porch, so elevation B." And I was like, oh my goodness, I obviously wanted that front porch, but it was something I was willing to give up if I had the inside the way I needed it to be. So that turned out to be a bonus. And the other change they made in the house was because they had elongated it. They took the mud room, which also had laundry in it coming off the garage, and they actually put the laundry room upstairs between one of the bathrooms and the ensuite. So there was room because of the elongated footprint of the home to put a full laundry room upstairs. And it's funny because I had said that I didn't want any changes, but if you could have made 2 changes that would have made me even happier about that home, it was the covered porch and the laundry room not being in the mud room. So I couldn't get to him quickly enough to give him my deposit check. So we wound up moving into that home, not without some trials and tribulations and some extras added in by the builder for some promises that they made that weren't upkept, etc. But ultimately, we wound up in our dream home. And it was just that. It was spacious and light and had room for a growing family and was in a community that, we wound up thriving in. Great neighbors, a street that had a boulevard at the end so that, it wasn't used as a through street. There were so many great things about that home. I took a landscaping course from a gardening perspective so that I could, build a garden out front that catered to what I wanted, there to be out there. I remember when we first moved in, my aunt and uncle gave us a lilac tree. It was still in a pot, so it was only a couple feet high um, when we got it. And today it's, gosh, 20-25 feet tall. Planted it close to the front porch so that when you come out on the front steps in the spring, you're accosted with the beautiful smell of lilac. Over the course of the time there, we built a pool in the backyard. We had a hot tub. The backyard was just a really great oasis for us to get away and really enjoy summers. My son growing up played a lot of baseball. Actually, we all played a lot of baseball, but my son most prolifically with his rep team. So we spent a lot of weekends away during the summers. So, never invested in cottage property or anything like that, just because we wouldn't have used it enough. So made our backyard our oasis that was easy to come home to. Inside, we had some great space. And I think one of my favorite places was the basement once we finished it, where we put in a media room, with a recliner couch and, a big TV on the wall. We had a bar area with a pool table and a bunch of TVs and, another fireplace downstairs. There was also, another guest room and bathroom and everything in the basement. We had a really great life in that house. When we redid the front driveway with interlock, we had a basketball net for the kids. And I know even, gosh, in doing the interlock, we made sure that we created a free throw line with the bricks. That wasn't obvious, but if you played basketball there enough, you knew there was a line and you could see it. So, all these little decisions that we made in the house just made it our own. And it was exquisite and it was lovely and it was perfect. And I'm really happy that we made the decision to buy that house, because there were so many people suggesting that it was not a good decision for us, and it wasn't in our best interest. I know that when we looked at buying that house, our salaries were much lower than they ultimately turned out to be. And we actually both took on part-time jobs so we were working full-time 9 to 5 during the day, and 3 nights a week we were working an extra 4 hours each, so an extra 12 hours a week. We were working to help save money to buy this house. So where there's a will, there's a way. And there was definitely a will, so we made the way. And I look back on that and I think that things could have gone very differently. Things could have been very different. Things could have happened very differently. But because we made those intentional decisions and we stuck to them and we made a plan, everything that we wanted came to fruition. And we were very, very fortunate. So, mentioned that we had a couple kids, and that was great. And school was 6 blocks away. And, high school was a little bit farther, but they actually built a brand new high school in our catchment that the kids got to go to. And gosh, I'll never forget going to one of the open houses before my kids started there, actually before my son, who's the oldest, started school there. And we were in the gym or the workout area. And, they had QR codes on the equipment, the apparatus that you could scan, and it would tell you what exercises to do, on that particular unit. And I thought back to the ropes that we had to climb in gym class back when I was young. And it was just such a juxtaposition in terms of, how far we'd come. So again, so many things that house afforded us as a family. But as the kids got older and they got into high school, they were involved with their sports and their friends and their jobs. And we were spending less and less time at home as a family. And that was okay. That was, I was fine with that. But I think the thing that was weighing on me most was the fact that here we had inside, we had 4,200 square feet of living space. And then who knows what else outside in terms of, the pool and the hot tub and basketball and things like that. We didn't have a huge yard, but we made the best of it every square inch. So I did some math and I took, the square footage of the kids' bedrooms and bathrooms and things like that into consideration. And ultimately, on a regular basis, we were only using 1,300 square feet of that 4,200 square feet that we had. And my goodness, we were also paying for that, right? We were paying for, not only were we paying the mortgage, but we were paying for the heat and the hydro and the water and the property taxes. And, in the town that we lived in, they were fairly steep. There was a lot of output for only living in less than a third of the space that we had. So we started talking about it as a family and figuring out whether or not there was even any appetite to consider living somewhere else. And, we actually, when I look back, we considered moving, actually, I think a year before we wound up moving ultimately. And that's the decision I'm actually here to share with you today. We found a place within the kids' high school catchment that was smaller, less upkeep, less taxes, less everything, and would still accommodate us as a family in terms of living space. And I think we made an offer on it. And at the last minute, I pulled the offer out because it just wasn't sitting properly with me. It checked all the boxes, but there was something about it that was just not right. So we actually put that thought to bed for almost a year. And, during that time frame, the cost of living in, a space that we weren't fully utilizing kept weighing on me. It weighed on me so much. And there were a lot of other things, that we had plans for. The kids ultimately, once they finished high school, would be considering post-secondary. And although we had started saving for them when they were each 1 month old and we had money put away, the cost of post-secondary these days, I don't know if you ever have enough money set aside. Plus, we wanted to ultimately retire on a boat in the South. So looking at putting away funds for that, as well as getting used to living in smaller quarters, were all things that were still on my mind. And I think the one thing that I hadn't taken into consideration and I hadn't done was really step forward a few years as we were making decisions on where to live, I kept looking at the immediate needs, the kids' school, the kids in the catchment, the kids, um, rooms and being with their friends. And what I wasn't putting first was where I needed to be ultimately. And again, that might sound selfish, but I've been drawn to water my entire life. And why I didn't consider, something close to water the first time around was probably impacted by making sure that I was in a home that was in the kids' high school catchment. But that was probably, well, and staying close to their friends and that kind of thing. But those were probably the only two reasons. And, looking back, we wound up moving when my son had 1 year left of high school and my daughter had 3 years left of high school. And while that might have seemed like forever at that point in time, it seems like a lifetime ago now. And if I had purchased a home in the catchment of their high school solely for that reason, I'd be moving again already because I would have fulfilled the need for me to have, a home in close to their high school. So I think that's where my thought process grew in the year that I took to really consider what it was that would make the best decision in the long run. So we wound up finding a condo on the water, and a lot of things, went into that decision. Um, in all honesty, one of the biggest issues was parking because my husband and I each had a vehicle, and we knew that we would be purchasing a vehicle for our son, who was going to be driving him and his sister back and forth to school every day. So parking was a big deal, and it's at a premium in the towns that we were looking at. So, one of the big factors weighing on us was a location that had lots of parking. We did decide to move to condo life. We did decide to downsize, and downsize we did. Now, the place we wound up buying has almost 1,600 square feet, 3 bedrooms. It's got an outdoor balcony on the 15th floor. And, I live right on the north shore of one of the Great Lakes, and the views are spectacular. And the balcony is spectacular. And the whole feel of the condo is so serene and tranquil and such a sanctuary that I can't imagine not living here. And after we moved here, I asked myself, what took us so long to live on the water? And again, I realized there's a time and a place in terms of where you live. And I needed to afford my kids the opportunity to grow up in a home where they could, ride their bike into the garage, or kids would ring the doorbell. They could jump into a pool in the backyard and have friends over to do the same. And we could have street parties and barbecues and things like that. We had that. But as we all advanced in our in age from a kid's perspective in terms of growing up, and we were moving closer to considering retirement, not at all on the radar imminently, but starting to plan for it in the future. We had to consider each stage that the kids were at to afford them the best opportunity. And then moving to the condo at the time we did proved to be the best decision we could have made all around. Now, if you ask the kids, they don't feel as emphatically as I do about it, But it's really interesting. One of my friends after we moved was talking to me, and they said, it's actually a good thing you moved while the kids still lived at home with you, because when they come home now, it's not home to the new place that, mom and dad moved to. It's home to a place that they lived at one point in time as well. So there's a familiarity there. So there were so many things that we took into consideration in making that move, but ultimately it turned out to be a good one. And a couple points of validation that came unexpectedly. I love my dad, but he is really good at questioning all the decisions I make. And typically, if I tell him about them ahead of time, I get a litany of reasons of why it's not a good idea. So in this particular circumstance, I decided not to tell him until it was a done deal. So he used to call, every Sunday type of thing. So the Sunday after we moved in, he called, as is typical. And he said, "So what's new?" I said, "Well, actually, we moved." And he said, "You what?" So I explained to him what we did and where we were, and the fact that we could lock the door and go away on a trip and not have to worry about grass being cut, or if anything that you have to worry about as a homeowner. The driveways are always shoveled, and we park underground so our cars don't have snow on them. And surprisingly, he said, "Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm actually kind of jealous." And that was one of the first times I actually felt validated by him, and felt like I had his approval for a decision I'd made. So that was a great day. Another piece of validation came from a friend I had been talking to during the whole move. And, she lived in a similar subdivision with a big house, kids similar ages, still with a big mortgage, still all the upkeep. And she said to me, "Congratulations." And I thanked her. She goes, "I can't believe how much courage you have." And I said, "Courage? How is that courage?" And she goes, "Oh, that took so much courage for you to kind of uproot your family and your kids and move to a new place and start fresh." A lot of us know that's what we should do, but we don't have the courage to do that. And I think that was one of the first times that I felt like the decisions that I tend to make aren't typical, or aren't normal, or aren't things that people do on an everyday basis. And it was really something that has stuck with me since then. And when I wake up every morning and I get to look outside at my incredible view, I know unequivocally that, the day we moved in here was one of the best decisions of my life. So I really would like to thank you for sharing your time with me today. To all of our listeners out there, I really thank you for joining us. And if you're ready to realize your wildest dreams, come and join us in the Wildly Courageous Women Facebook group, where we're changing people's lives one brave decision at a time. I'm Dana Peever. Until next time, make great decisions and do life fun. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wildly Courageous Women. Keep listening to hear more stories of these incredible women realizing their wildest dreams. If you have a story to tell about a decision that you've made that has impacted your life, I'd love to feature you as a guest. Please get in touch, and don't forget to grab my latest gift by clicking below. I'm Dana Peever. As always, make great decisions and do life fun.